Minutes, meeting August 3rd, 2022, regular meeting.
I motion that we approve the minutes for the August 3rd, 2022 regular meeting.
Second. Vote please.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Councilwoman Trainer,
Yes,
Councilman Solomon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Litherland,
Yes.
Mayor Ashford.
Yes. Reports, city administrator.
Mayor, council, just one thing, Leslie Klesmeyer, our grant consultant, was here Tuesday. She started off meeting with Paul, and then I think she made her rounds with 6 different directors. She'll be back in again next Tuesday to sit down with me and Jeff and then meet the other directors. So we're moving forward. She's already got some ideas. I emailed her today, so we're moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance director, Paul.
Thank you for your time and the meeting this afternoon at 4. We do not have any expenditure or transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Public hearing, second reading. We know to go through, agenda item 1, second reading, consider adoption of ordinance 2022-06, changing the city building code IBC section 105-2 to allow 1-story detached accessory structures to be a maximum size of 200 square feet. Changed from 120 square feet to be constructed without a building permit. Ken?
Evening, Mayor, council members. This is the second reading. We've discussed this before. Basically, the residential code allows for 200 square foot accessory buildings without a permit, and the current international building code restricts that size to 120 square feet. So this would bring them both to be 200 square feet and keeping with each other. And by allowing the larger building to be without a permit, it does not require the required soils reports and foundation engineering for the 200-foot structure. So we're recommending approval of this. Any questions I could address?
Did you say for 200-foot, you do need an engineer for array?
Currently, in a commercial project,
Right.
if it's over 120 square feet, it's required to have a permit. And that would require a foundation design and a soils report. So this allows a little bit larger building to comply without having to go through those steps.
Sure, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Any other question?
No, no.
Do I hear a motion?
Your point of order, because the council is adopting this as a code by reference, state statute does require a public hearing. So you would open a public hearing and take any comment on this one.
Okay, at this time, open public hearing. Again, it would be the same.
It's because it's legislative. There, you don't have to read into the record any of that normal script.
Okay. All right, so, the hearing, public hearing to consider adoption of ordinance 2022-06, changing city building code IBC, section 105.2, to allow 1-story detached accessory structures to be a maximum size of 200 square feet, changed from 100 square feet to be constructed without a building permit. Any comment, public comment? Go ahead.
It was changed from
Come up.
120 to
Yeah.
200.
Come up to the mic, please.
It was just corrected, it was changed from 120 to 200.
Yeah. Take your name, Scott.
Scott Marshall,
Address.
329 Wayland Avenue.
Now. Question.
I was addressing it's from 120 to 200 feet.
Yeah.
And it's great because I was one of the guys talking to the building guy about it. So that's good. No concrete.
Thank you, Scott. Any other public comment? If not, we'll close the public hearing. We'll go back into council.
I move that we adopt ordinance changing the city building code and by reference section 105.2, the International Building Code to allow one-story detached accessible structures to be a maximum size of 200 square foot, changed from 120 square feet to be constructed without a building permit.
Vote please.
Councilwoman Trenary,
Yes.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Litterland,
Yes.
Councilman Salzman,
Yes.
Mayor Ashworth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2. It's been withdrawn until September 7th. 2022, 5:30 PM regular meeting. Do I need to read the whole thing? Okay. Agenda item 3, withdrawn until September 7th, 2022, 5:30 PM regular meeting. Agenda item 4. Withdrawn until September 7th, 2022, 5:30 PM regular meeting. Okay, we're going to new business. Agenda item A. Consider approval resolution 2022-26, approving upgrade to personnel handbook. Carol.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Before you is just a really simple resolution. Governor Polis recently signed into law a bill that changes the work comp process. Specifically, it's the injury notice process. The notice that an employer is required to post in the workplace and requirements for occupational disease reporting. And so just to make sure our handbook is in compliance with that, this resolution addresses that. The big change in the handbook is really from the 4 days to the 10 days, which is outlined. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, I'm sorry.
Any questions?
No.
Or a motion?
I motion that we approve resolution 2022-26, approving an update to the personnel handbook.
I'll second.
Vote please.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Councilwoman Trenary,
Yes.
Councilman Salzman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Litterland,
Yes.
Mayor Ashworth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Item gonna be granting authority to Aqua Works DBO to submit grant application for utility collection and distribution system to DOLA in the amount of 200,000 for each utility. Frank?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Couple of weeks ago, or a couple of meetings ago, y'all approved a contract with AquaWorks to do the engineering and to help us with grant applications to the state revolving fund for water and sewer systems improvements. And they contacted me last week, AquaWorks did, and said they can already apply. The deadline's the end of August. They can apply for a $200,000 grant for water and a $200,000 grant for sewer, for wastewater, for engineering services, but the council has to authorize those grant applications. She's already working on them. She just can't submit them to DOLA unless y'all approve. Let me know if you have any.
And this is Adam Summers with AquaWorks. I'm on the call as well in case there's any questions for me. One minor update, I may suggest removing the $200,000 because we may end up applying for a greater grant amount. So I may just strike that amount so it gives us additional flexibility.
Oh, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. So just authorize AquaWorks to apply for grants for water and sewer and leave the amounts out.
Strike the 200,000.
In the amount of 200,000. You can strike.
Thanks, Adam.
Any good questions? There a motion?
I'll make the motion that we authorize AquaWorks DBO to submit grant applications for utility collection and distribution systems to DOLA for each utility.
Second.
Vote please, Melissa.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Shenari,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitman,
Yes.
Councilman Solomani.
Yes.
Mayor Ashworth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Item C, second reading for adoption of ordinance 2022-07, determined to follow the provisions of the uniform election code for November 8, 2022 general election. Melissa?
Good evening, council. This is a housekeeping item. We've already seen this item. It's just stating that we are going to comply with the uniform election code with the county.
Any question?
No.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
I'll motion that we adopt for the adoption of the ordinance 2022-07. Determining to follow the provisions of the uniform election code for November 8, 2022 general election. Second.
Vote please.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Shenari,
Yes.
Councilman Solomani.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitman,
Yes.
Mayor Ashworth.
Yeah. Thank you. Consider approval to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Teller County Clerk and Recorder for the 2022 general election. Melissa?
So I received this from the county and it is just the IGA that states that we will comply also with the fees that they furnish to us and that will comply with them. Any questions?
Is there a motion?
I motion that we approve entering into an intergovernmental agreement with Teller County Clerk and Recorder for the 2022 general election.
I'll second.
Vote please.
Councilman Green,
Yes.
Councilman Solomani,
Yes.
Councilman Shenari,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitman,
Yes.
Mayor Ashworth.
Yes. Agenda item E, which is not listed, but it's resolution amending personnel. You know, different things.
Here you go.
First reading to approve ordinance 2022-11, an ordinance submitting to the registered electors voting in a general coordinated election to be held November 8, 2022. Ballot questions permitting the allowing and taxing marijuana. Aaron?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, the matter before you tonight comes before you because you, as City Council, are required by state law to set the ballot title and the ballot questions for any questions that are referred to the voters. And of course, recall that at your last meeting, you considered the ordinance that was submitted by petitioners and circulated through the city as an initiated ordinance concerning the allowance of marijuana sales in the city. You considered that ordinance and you decided not to approve it. State law says that upon your failure to approve, you are required to refer the question to the voters. And so you're here tonight to set the ballot title and the ballot question for the voters. State law says that when you have a new tax, that you set that ballot title by ordinance. And so that's why an ordinance is before you tonight. The ordinance is bringing to you for your approval 2 ballot questions. One dealing with the approval of marijuana in the city and conditioning the voters' decision to vote for that and for that to pass on the passage of the second question that is presented for you tonight. The second question is a question dealing with asking the voters to approve taxing marijuana. And it does that in two subparts. It asks the voters to authorize taxing marijuana through an excise tax of 5% on the first transfer of unprocessed marijuana. And the second subpart of your tax question asks the voters to approve a sales tax, a special sales tax on marijuana. For purposes of presenting this to you tonight, I filled in the sales tax with the 10%. But that is just a plug number. Perhaps you might want to consider a higher number. I will tell you that my understanding is that a higher number is allowed, but I would like to do some research and bring that back to you on second reading, just to make sure that I'm completely right, that the state hasn't set some aggregate sales tax in another statute. So with that, I'm going to pause there and see if you have any questions on the sales tax question, the first part, or the second part, or the marijuana question. And I'm going to take your questions, and then I want to talk to you about a third part to the sales tax question that I would like to suggest to you tonight. So any questions on the setting of the ballot title, ballot question for marijuana?
I have one. Oh, no. Okay. Mine's tax question, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will move on. Are there any questions then? On the second question, ballot question, in the ordinance, which is listed on page 2 under section 4.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and it's very hard, as you found out, trying to research in the statutes, all the state laws regarding marijuana. I don't know if it's a up in Leadville, if it's a city law or if it's a state law. The retail distributor also has to be associated with a grower, correct? Is it? Okay, so that's, but if the grower is not in the city limits, how do we impose a tax if the transaction happens outside city limits?
That's a great question, and I'll have to research that for you.
Okay,
Is it per? I'm not trying.
It isn't, it's really a side
Okay, I
issue.
was just
But thank you
wondering
for
if that
that.
was
But
something
it
we
is-
needed to consider right this second.
well,
Or
for
something.
understanding,
Should
we
it
have-
pass, can we consider it later down?
Yes,
Okay. Because it's a good question.
but we have to, if it's written in this ballot language, we have to follow. You know, if this passes, we do have to follow as it is posted on the ballot, and
Well, that's the
If
reason,
transactions-
that's the reason I was asking if it's pertinent to this particular ordinance.
that's right. And it's not necessarily, but I will point out, just as a side note, that if the tax question passes, then I will be before you, the heavy lifting really begins, because I will be before you bringing you ordinances to codify in your municipal code that deal with all the details.
That was my next question on that. So this is not, this tax dollar number percentage is not written in stone. This is something that we can pass saying that, yes, we're going to tax it, but we're not locked into the 10%.
Incorrect. Okay, so when the side heavy lifting I'm talking about is gonna be the ordinance that talks about how it's administered, how it's collected, all the details. That's not pertinent to your question tonight. Setting the amount of the tax has to be done in this ballot title. And you have till your second reading to settle on filling in the blanks. But they do have to go out to the voters with those numbers filled.
Well, I do have a question for Chief Bright then, because I know, Chief, I know you've done some research into the legal ramifications. And did you get any information on what the other municipalities were charging on taxes?
Good evening, council. When I reached out to similar statutory cities of like Cripple Creek, most of them are only a retail, collecting the retail sales tax.
Okay,
There are a few that venture off into licensing for employees, et cetera, but as far as the taxes, none of them have an excise tax imposed, mostly just rely on the retail sales tax.
did they give you a percentage at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay, no, I wasn't, because I know you were not looking into that particular end of it, but I just wanted to know if you talked to them.
Oh. We've spent a lot of time talking with other entities, and we got a big listing from CML of all the different cities. So on average, you'd see the excise tax at 5%, and being a statutory city, we're limited to 5% on the excise tax. Some do, as Bud said, some do not have it. Most do when you look at the CML list. Some like Crescent Butte just charge their normal sales tax rate, 4.5, where we're doing a special sales tax rate, which can be set at 10% or 15%.
But for the,
And then others will even have an occupation tax, which is what Aaron is going to discuss with you next. So yeah, we've looked at a lot of different entities and what kind of rates do they charge.
but this average is what?
The average excise tax is 5%, even with home rule charter cities across, some go more, some have it. We cannot do this, but some will say up to 10%, but we're charging 5 right now.
Okay,
But we're limited from the statutes.
Right.
But then the sales tax, many just use their current sales tax rate, but we're able to use a special sales tax rate for this one particular item. So that's a benefit there that Aaron has identified.
and what has been their revenue from those tax rates?
Well, we talked to Central City. We looked at a lot of different places, in some of the Denver areas, it's huge, $10-14 million for some of the larger cities up there. We talked to a Central City because like size, a gaming town, they have between Blackhawk and them, they have close to 85% of the gaming market going through that channel. And then the last 2 years, both their excise, their sales, and their licensing has been generating about $235K for them. So we, would hope to do more than that because there are a fair amount of costs involved. As Aaron will point out, an excise tax and an occupation tax are something the city has to collect. Because we're statutory, the sales tax can be collected by the state, but we're going to have to collect those two components. So that's a lot of work. There's a lot of work for the clerk's office, police department and everything. So, we have to hope that whatever we're generating will cover those basic costs and leave some surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, wait, don't run away. Do you have any kind of ballpark figure for what we're gonna put in there? Have you?
Yeah, actually, we're gonna do, as we did with the sales tax, the 1 cent increase, where we state a range. Because I think it's really it's unfair component to just try and tell the voter it's going to generate X when it's very difficult for us to quantify it. And especially this year, retail marijuana sales across the state are down about 30%. And that's being attributed to the fact that New Mexico has legalized it, and much of the traffic from Texas is not coming here, they're going to New Mexico. And then you have the other component where it's going to be on the ballot in Colorado Springs. And if it's passed there, what does that do? So there are a lot of moving parts that would make saying it's going to generate this fixed amount very difficult. So that's why we think it's more fair to use a range, and we're using between 100,000 and $1 million.
Erin just showed me her copy, which is different than. Again, also one more question. If we were to exceed the 1 million, by some miracle, would Tabor make us return a portion of that sales tax?
Yeah, and it does, and that it becomes very difficult because how do you identify all of the clients that paid that tax and try and get it to them? It's the same with the lodging tax or anything. And that's why you generally have a high number like 1 million, because you really don't want to go over that because it becomes quite burdensome to try and identify who to return that to.
Would you say that 10% then in our particular situation would be a reasonable amount?
For the sales tax
Yes.
component of it? I'm the finance guy, so I'm gonna say, well, you could go, you could use a higher figure and see how it goes, up to 15% or up to whatever the council wants to do. You can see in the first year or two how that works and what it's generating. And then you could back it down if you felt it was too burdensome. Because remember, the state has 15% excise and the 10% sales, and they can go even higher on that already. So there's 25 for the state, then our component.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
I have a couple questions. I want to go back to the initial shall we sell marijuana in Cripple, Colorado. It says to permit and license regulated marijuana facilities. Does that need to be broken down to recreational, medical, and grow facilities?
The question is simple, and my recommendation is you keep it simple. The ordinance that was initiated does contain the all of those types, the breakdown. So we could certainly add that. I don't believe that it's required. So I drafted it more simply, and in hopes that.
So that's just all encompassing.
Right.
It's already, it will be written into the ordinance only.
It will be written into the ordinance because you've seen the ordinance, but yes, it is all encompassing because I opted to go with a broader, just put marijuana in there, which of course includes retail, medical, and then all of those types of retail businesses that are associated and the medical businesses that are associated.
Question, kind of. Fortunately, I was able to have time to talk to Frank and to Paul, explaining the taxes. So I'm not going to raise hell about the taxes. However, if let's say we put in 10% for the city, we also have the city sales tax on top of that. Okay. Okay, that's included. The last part, such taxes, investment income, therefore constitute what are approved revenue changes and may be collected and spent by the city without regard to any expenditure, revenue raising or other limitation. So, in other words, with the exception of the 5%, on the first sale or transfer of the marijuana. Everything after that goes into general fund of the city. And then it's determined by city administration to where that the revenues are coming.
City council. Ultimately.
By city council, but with the exit, with the. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, there you go. I guess mine is going to be. Set a higher amount. Up to 18% or whatever. And then we got room to jump.
I had
in.
no problem with that. Yeah, as long as it's up to,
Yeah,
and we can control it, because if we're getting too low revenue, maybe we can bump it up, or if we're not getting enough, we can drop it down a little bit. It gives us some flexibility. I like that.
I think that's great direction. Again, I'll just reiterate that I will need to come back to you and make sure that you can go that high and that there isn't another statute that puts an overall limit. And I will be able to tell you that on September 2nd. But I'm going to change these numbers to the 18, and that's what you'll see on second reading.
But it's an up to.
An up to.
rather than a-
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
that's
good.
all
It's not
language
just-
is already in there.
Yeah.
You just put the percentage in.
So then we will have. The 2.6, or if we jump it, with Pitney, but it's approved, the sales tax. So it'll be up to 21.6%. In for the city,
Well,
just on our excise and sales tax.
if
It
you,
might be coming back
Yeah.
on state either.
only if the council, when you're adopting the actual ordinance codifying the tax, choose to set an 18% rate.
What about the transaction fee?
Yes, thank you. So I am ready to move on to what I will call the third subpart of the tax question. It took me a bit longer because I'm sorry, Paul, did you want to say?
I was just going to interject before you introduce that, if approved, portion of what the state collects from our jurisdiction, 10% of that comes back to us also.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yes. Of the sales tax the state
Sales.
collects,
excellent.
their excise tax. So we get a share there.
Thank you, Paul. So let me talk now about the transaction tax, or what is known as an occupation tax. There are, in our research, which Paul was very helpful in providing us, we did find a number of smaller, primarily Western Slope municipalities that impose an occupation tax. And this statutory city, Cripple Creek, could impose a occupation tax. So I could bring this back to you with that occupation tax written into the tax question. I did not do that at this point because in order to expedite getting this to you and to do that additional research, I left it out. I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with the occupation tax, and I am. So my recommendation is that the council discuss whether you want to add a third tax to the tax question in the way of an occupation tax. I would draft it so it would all go into the general fund. It wouldn't be parsed out 25% for marketing. It would all go into the general fund. And the amount of that is typically not a percentage. The amount of that is a flat dollar amount. So many of the municipalities that we saw that charge this have a $5 transaction occupation tax. It's important to remember that the occupation tax is charged to the business, right? The business will likely pass it on to the customer, but the business is the taxpayer for purposes of the occupation tax.
It's basically like, excise taxes to
What
federal,
other,
they collect for the federal, you know, they can use that money for 30 days or whatever time it is, they have to pay it to the state and the federal, so the retailers can use this money for a certain period of time. I mean, it's like, you drop dead dates, you pay it. You can't use it forever, but you use it to do days, so this is an advantage for the retailers to be able to use their money to support their business.
But what, what other business here in the community is charged with an occupation tax? They could say, wait a second, why are you, picking on us? I'm just throwing that out.
well, I found that talking to some of the other retailers that in a lot of municipalities, it's an either or. It's either an excise tax or it's an occupation tax. And I don't want to overburden the businesses because it's going to, especially with the other municipalities that are now voting on this. I don't know that it would be a good idea to add another tax on top of what we're already asking. Because we're already asking 5% at one end and another 18 up to 18% at another end. To add more tax to it. I think that's something we ought to see. Should it pass, we ought to see how the taxes that we're already initiating are going to affect the sales of it. Because again, we don't want to get into a situation where it's costing the city more money than what it's worth to do. So I think at this point, the occupation tax would not be a real good idea to add into it.
Might be some.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Green, the reason that we kind of were looking at this is we don't know how much is going to be sold. If the marijuana is passed and let's say there's not that much sold up here, we still have the obligation to audit. To get even the excise tax, we have to hire auditors to go audit the books to make sure they're paying us the excise. Sales tax goes to the state, we'll get that. We're not saying to the council that you have to approve all of this. 5% excise tax will be charged. You have whatever you want to set on sales tax, you can go up to the amount that's approved by the voters. And you can do the same with an occupation tax. You might not set it at all to begin with. It's a council decision. Our concern as staff is we don't know how much is going to be sold up here, but we are going to have the city clerk having to deal with the retailers.
You want the option.
And we're just wanting the option. That's all.
Okay.
The only reason we're throwing it out there is,
That clears it.
yeah, we just have no idea. If we only get $50,000 or $100,000, and it costs us $200,000 for the PD.
Well, that was my
city clerk,
biggest concern, yeah.
that's why we were throwing it out there as an additional, just to put it out there again. Once you adopt the ordinances, you can set the limits at whatever you want them at. That's why it's out.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that makes sense.
Our overhead is pretty much,
Don't go away.
That makes sense.
we don't have any control over overhead, we got.
Well, exactly. Well, that was my biggest concern. I don't want to get to the point where it gets too expensive to the point where people just don't buy this stuff. Because we're gonna still have to audit it whether we make $10 or $2 million.
Right.
We gotta audit it either way, and it's still gonna cost us. I just don't want to overburden it. And right now, the fact of the matter is we don't know how much it's gonna generate or not generate. So if it's an option where we can control it, in other words, another up to, I'm fine with it.
So
I'm absolutely fine with it.
The question I have, Frank, perhaps you talk to the rest of the folks, cost of business license. A lot of communities jack up the business license quite a bit. Has anybody discussed that?
That would be for ordinance time if it passes.
That would be in the ordinance that you adopt,
Okay.
Yeah,
but
actually, the way that the ordinance is written is that it preserves that decision to be done separately by resolution. And it's quite typical when you pass a permit fee, a license fee, that what you're looking at is you're, looking at the cost to administer the program and building into that permit fee, something that will reasonably cover the staff.
We just
time.
want to cover our costs at
Yes.
this point and not get into a bind. And again, I just didn't want to get to a point where we're locked into some particular tax at this point. That's something we can determine later. So I don't have a problem with putting the occupation tax in there. As long as we know that we have the availability to control it. And that's the key.
That's why we like the up to on both the sales tax and the occupation tax, because it allows council to adjust based on revenues or cost.
And I hear that, that's the way I would bring it back, is I would draft it as an occupation up to $5 per sale. Is the way I would propose to insert that.
Yeah, I just want to be able to control it because we're going to have to feel our way through this. None of us are, I don't have any experience with it. I've never been in front of you. So.
Any other
Good to know.
discussion? Okay.
You wanna guide us on the motion? Because this is gonna be really tricky.
I would like to guide you on the motion. So I would like to suggest the motion should be to adopt on first reading ordinance number 20-22-11. Then read the title with the following proposed amendments. In section 4, to replace the 10%, the up to 10% for the sales tax with an up to 18%. And the second amendment to add to the sales tax question an occupation tax of up to $5 per sale. And I will bring that language back to you.
Okay,
What about this man amount?
I don't believe, I think the estimated amount is by stating it in a range. Paul can follow up, but I think Paul is comfortable with the range of the 100,000 to the 1 million in my draft. Even with the addition of the occupation tax, and I see Paul is nodding, so.
You're nodding, okay.
And your motion is really just to direct me to bring it back on second reading with that line, those amendments in it.
okay. Ready?
Ready to go.
Alrighty, I make a motion that we adopt on first reading ordinance 2022-11, an ordinance submitting to the registered electors voting in the general coordinated election to be held November 8th, 2022. Ballot questions pertaining to allowing and taxing marijuana. And I would direct staff to amend section 4, replacing the wording up to 10% with the wording up to 18%. Also in section 4, I would direct staff to add a second amendment, add occupation tax up to $5 per sale.
Second,
Vote please.
Councilman Solomon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Litherland,
Yes.
Councilman Green,
yes,
Councilwoman Shenari,
Yes,
Mayor Ashford.
Yeah.
Thank you.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
Very much.
Cool. Okay, Aaron, appreciate all the work. you've
My
done.
pleasure.
And bring the ordinance back. And work on that next meeting. No further business, manager.
Yeah, I should-